The smell of smoke hit me before I even saw the flames. My cornfield, my pride, my family's livelihood was burning like a torch in the night. I dropped my coffee and ran, but it was too late. The golden stalks that took me all season to grow were now black ash blowing in the wind. Standing there, heart pounding, I saw her Karen, the HOA president, smirking from her porch like she'd finally won. She'd been on my back for months, complaining that my farm didn't fit her fancy community aesthetic. But she didn't know one thing. Every acre of that corn was insured for $2 million. And when the investigation began, the tables turned fast. She thought she destroyed me, but she just handed me the biggest payout of my life, and a front row seat to her downfall. Asterisk, when I first pulled into Maple Creek Estates with my old pickup truck and a trailer full of farming tools, I knew right away I stood out. The neighborhood was a row of picture-perfect houses, trimmed lawns, white fences, and mailbox numbers that gleamed like they'd been polished every morning. My truck, covered in dust and dents, didn't exactly fit the image, but I didn't care. I had just bought 5 acres on the far edge of the subdivision, land that came with open soil and a small red barn. I wanted peace, a simple life, and a place to grow my corn the way my father had taught me. The first few days were peaceful. I spent mornings working the soil and afternoons fixing the old irrigation lines. The sun was strong, but I loved it. I'd grown up on a farm before life pulled me into city work, and this was my way of getting back to what mattered. I waved at neighbors when they passed by, though most just stared curiously. I figured they weren't used to seeing someone farming in a place like this. I wasn't wrong. One afternoon, as I was unloading fertilizer bags, I heard the sharp click of heels on my driveway. I turned to see a woman in a bright pink blazer, hair sprayed stiff, holding a clipboard. "You must be the new homeowner," she said with a forced smile. "I'm Karen Monroe, president of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association." Her tone had that edge, polite, but only on the surface. I wiped my hands on my jeans and nodded. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ben Carter, just getting the land ready for planting." Her smile faltered when she glanced at the dirt-covered yard and the tractor parked beside my barn. "Planting," she repeated, almost choking on the word. "As in crops, corn," I said simply. "It's good soil here, and I've got the space." Her nose wrinkled like she'd smelled something bad. "Mr. Carter, Maple Creek Estates maintains a certain standard of appearance. Farming isn't really part of that." She held up her clipboard. "You see, the HOA has rules about property aesthetics. No large-scale gardening, no commercial farming, and certainly no ma'am," I interrupted, keeping my voice calm. "I'm not running a business. This is just my land, and I like growing corn. Nothing wrong with that." Karen frowned, tapping her pen. "I'll have to check the bylaws, but I can assure you this kind of setup won't sit well with the board." I shrugged. "Do what you need to do. I bought this property fair and square." She huffed, turned sharply, and marched off down the driveway. As she left, I could feel her eyes burning holes in the back of my neck. That was my first encounter with Karen Monroe, and it told me everything I needed to know. Over the next week, I got letters in my mailbox. "Notice a violation," they read in bold red letters. I said my tractor was an eyesore. The next complained about soil disruption. Another claimed my cornfield would attract pests. I laughed at the absurdity of it all. I wasn't violating anything. I'd already checked county land laws before buying the place. But Karen didn't care about laws. She cared about control. Neighbors began to whisper. Some avoided eye contact when I waved. A few, though, offered quiet support. Mrs. Jenkins from across the street brought over cookies one day and said, "Don't let that woman push you around. She's been bossing folks here for years." Her words made me smile. "Thanks, ma'am," I said. "I can handle her." But Karen didn't like being ignored. A few nights later, I caught her standing at the edge of my property, taking pictures with her phone. When I called out, she jumped. "Just documenting community concerns," she said quickly, pretending not to be embarrassed. "You'll be hearing from us soon." Then she strutted off like she owned the place. I went back to work, but deep down, I knew this was just the start. Karen was the type who couldn't stand losing control. My little cornfield had become her obsession. By late spring, the corn was already sprouting, neat rows of green pushing through the soil. Every time I looked at them, I felt a sense of peace. The air smelled of earth and promise. My father used to say, "You can't rush good things. You just plant, water, and wait." I lived by those words, but Karen didn't understand patience. When the HOA couldn't find me anymore, since I wasn't breaking any laws, she switched tactics. She called the county inspector, claiming I was using industrial chemicals. When they came, they found nothing wrong. She called animal control next, saying my dog barked too much. He didn't. Each attempt failed, and with every failure, her anger grew. One evening, as I was locking the barn, I saw her standing across the street, arms crossed. "You think you've won?" she said quietly. "But you're ruining this neighborhood. We'll find a way to stop you." I looked her dead in the eye. "You can't stop what's already growing. Karen, that's the thing about seeds. Once they take root, they fight their way up." She said nothing, just turned and walked away into the dark. But as I watched her go, I couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. The wind that night carried a strange chill, one that made the corn leaves rustle louder than usual. I didn't know it then, But those quiet whispers in the field weren't just the wind. They were warning me the storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. The summer air hung thick with humidity and the sweet scent of corn. By mid-July, my field was taller than I was, rows of green swaying in rhythm with the breeze. Every morning, I'd walk between them, brushing my fingers along the stalks, listening to the soft rustle that always reminded me of my father's old farm. It was peaceful, grounding, exactly what I'd dreamed of when I left city life behind. But peace has a way of attracting trouble when someone like Karen is around. She hadn't spoken to me directly since that last confrontation, but her presence was everywhere. I'd see her car creeping slowly past my driveway, her phone pointed out the window like a camera. I started finding footprints near my fence in the mornings, and sometimes, my gate was left open. My dog Rusty would bark into the darkness at night, ears perked, growling low. Something was off. I could feel it. A week later, I received another envelope in the mail. This one wasn't the usual HOA notice. It was handwritten, messy, and angry. Last warning, remove your corn or face the consequences. No name, but I didn't need one. Only one person in the neighborhood hated my farm that much. I took it straight to the sheriff's office. But there wasn't much they could do. Could be a prank, the deputy said, tapping the letter against his desk. We'll keep it on file. I nodded, though I could tell they didn't take it seriously. Still, I started locking up my property at night, double-checking everything before bed. For a few days, things went quiet. Too quiet. Then came the night I'll never forget. It was around 4:30 a.m. when I woke to a strange popping sound, like firecrackers in the distance. Rusty was barking frantically at the window. I sat up, heart racing. The room glowed faintly orange. For a split second, I thought it was sunrise, until I smelled the smoke, thick, bitter, unmistakable. I threw on my boots and ran outside. What I saw stopped me dead. My cornfield, the entire stretch of it, was burning. Flames tore through the rows like an angry wave, lighting up the night sky. The heat hit me in the face as I ran closer, shouting, "No!" The fire cracked and hissed, the stalks collapsing one by one into blackened ash. I grabbed the hose and tried to spray the edges, but it was useless. The flames were too big, the wind too strong. My hands shook as I called 911, barely able to speak. Within minutes, the fire trucks arrived, sirens slicing through the early morning stillness. Firefighters rushed in, shouting orders, spraying foam and water. But by then, the damage was done. As I stood there, chest heaving, I noticed something across the street. A figure standing on the porch, arms crossed, face lit by the glow of the fire. Karen. She didn't move, didn't help, just watched. For a moment, our eyes met, and I swear she almost smiled. By sunrise, my field was gone. All that remained was smoke and ash, blackened soil stretching across acres. The firefighters packed up, patting my shoulder, saying they'd done what they could. One of them asked gently, "Any idea how it started?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I've got an idea." When the investigators arrived later that day, I told them everything about the threats, the photos, the letter. They examined the burn patterns, took soil samples, and walked the perimeter with cameras. The fire started at multiple points. One of them said, "That's not natural. Someone set this intentionally." I nodded, jaw tight. "Then you know who to talk to." They questioned Karen that afternoon. She claimed she'd been asleep all night, but her story didn't add up. Several neighbors had seen her outside before dawn, walking near my fence line. One even mentioned the smell of gasoline. Still, without hard evidence, the police couldn't arrest her. Not yet. I spent the next few days cleaning up what was left. The smell of smoke clung to everything. My clothes, my hair, the barn. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flames again. My father's old saying echoed in my head. You can always regrow what burns, but you can't regrow trust. Karen tried to act innocent afterward, even dropping by once with fake sympathy. "Such a tragedy," she said, folding her hands like she cared. "Maybe it's a sign that farming isn't right for this neighborhood." I stared at her, holding back my anger. "You should go," I said flatly. "Before I forget, I'm a gentleman." She left quickly, but I could tell she thought she'd finally won. She didn't know I wasn't finished, not even close. 2 days later, my insurance agent came by to assess the damage. He walked the field with me, clipboard in hand, nodding slowly. "Mr. Carter, your policy covers full loss. Given the acreage, the total insured value comes to $2 million. I blinked. $2 million? He smiled. "You were smart to file that agricultural coverage when you did. We'll process it right away." For the first time since the fire, I felt a small spark of relief. Karen might have taken my harvest, but she hadn't taken my future. In fact, she'd just handed me more than she could ever imagine. As the sun set over the charred land that evening, I stood there with Rusty by my side, breathing in the fading smoke. The air was heavy, but somewhere underneath, I could already smell the earth healing. My field was gone, but I wasn't defeated. The fire might have burned my crops, but soon enough, it would burn her lies, too. The game had just changed, and this time, I had the upper hand. The morning after the fire, Maple Creek estates buzzed with whispers. Neighbors stood in small groups along the street, pretending to talk about the weather but stealing glances toward my property. The blackened field had turned my corner of the neighborhood into something out of a disaster movie, ash floating in the air, scorched soil steaming under the morning sun. Fire trucks were gone, but yellow tape still fluttered across the fence line. It was hard to believe that just 2 days ago, that same ground had been filled with golden corn. I hadn't slept much. The smell of smoke clung to everything, my walls, my clothes, even my coffee. I sat on the porch steps, watching investigators pace the property. They marked spots with flags, scraped samples into jars, and spoke in low, serious tones. It wasn't just a random accident anymore. The lead investigator, a man named Wildest, had already told me what I suspected. This wasn't spontaneous combustion. Mr. Carter, someone used an I nodded, though the words still made my stomach tighten. You think it's arson? He looked up from his notes. We don't think we know. The question is who? Karen's name burned in my throat, but I forced myself to stay calm. She threatened me, I said quietly. Told me I'd regret planting my field. I even got a letter. I handed him the wrinkled paper I'd saved. Wallace studied it, then slipped it into a clear bag. You did the right thing bringing this in. We'll dust it for prints. By noon, a patrol car rolled up to Karen's pristine white house. The officers knocked on her door, and within minutes, she appeared still in her robe, pretending to be shocked. I watched from my porch as they spoke. She gestured dramatically toward the remains of my field, shaking her head, acting like the victim of some neighborhood tragedy. But her eyes met mine just once, and that look, cold, defiant, told me everything. The investigation dragged on for several days. The community grew restless. Some people started avoiding her. Others whispered that maybe she'd finally gone too far. Then one morning, Wallace came back with a grim smile. We found traces of gasoline on a pair of gloves in her garage, he said. She claims they're from cleaning her mower, but the samples match the accelerant used in the fire. I felt my jaw tighten. So what happens now? He sighed. We're still building the case. But let's just say, if she was trying to hide something, she did a terrible job. Meanwhile, my insurance agent called. Mr. Carter, we've completed the damage report, he said over the phone. Your total payout is approved $2 million. The funds will be transferred within the week. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. $2 million? It felt surreal. That policy had been a small precaution, something my father taught me to do years ago. Always protect what you grow, he'd said. Mother Nature isn't the only thing that can burn you. Now, those words couldn't have been truer. I didn't celebrate them. Not yet. Money didn't erase what had happened. It didn't rebuild the trust or the peace I'd lost. Still, it gave me power, something Karen didn't expect. That week, I started making plans. I met with contractors to discuss rebuilding the barn and upgrading the property. I contacted an agricultural consultant about using the payout to expand my operations legally. If Karen hated my Favakar cornfield before, she was going to lose her mind when she realized I was about to turn it into a full-fledged farm with equipment, fencing, and a roadside stand. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd tried to destroy what I built, but instead, she gave me the resources to make it 10 times bigger. The next time I saw her, she was leaving a meeting with 2 HOA board members. They looked uncomfortable. She looked furious. I could hear snippets of their conversation as I walked past. You put the whole association at risk, Karen, one of them said. Baseless accusations, she snapped. That man's ruining our neighborhood. I'm the only one doing something about it. I stopped and turned. Funny, I said calmly, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the one falling apart. Her face flushed red. You'll regret this, she hissed. I'll make sure of it. Karen, I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. You already did. That night, I got a call from Wallace again. We've submitted the case to the district attorney. Given the evidence, arson charges are likely. I thought you'd want to know. I didn't cheer or gloat. I just stared out at the dark field, feeling the weight of it all sink in. Rusty lay at my feet, head on his paws, tail thumping softly. The world felt quieter now, heavy, but in a way that told me things were shifting. The next morning, I awoke to find a for sale sign in front of Karen's house. Word spread that the HOA had voted to remove her as president. She was facing criminal charges, legal fees, and neighbors who wanted nothing to do with her anymore. And me. I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching as moving trucks pulled into her driveway. For the first time in months, I smiled, not out of revenge, but out of relief. The fire had taken my crops, but it gave me something else. Perspective. I'd seen the worst of people and the best of resilience. Sometimes, destruction clears the ground for new growth, and I intended to make sure what grew next was stronger than ever. As the trucks drove away and Karen's pink blazer disappeared for good, I whispered to myself, that's one we'd pulled out for good. Then I turned back toward my land ready to start planting again. The morning after Karen moved out was the first time the neighborhood felt quiet again. The gossip had died down, the tension had faded, and the air seemed lighter, cleaner somehow. Standing on my porch, coffee in hand, I watched the sun rise over the blackened soil that used to be my cornfield. The scars of the fire were still visible, but in a strange way, I saw beauty in them. It reminded me that from ashes, new life always finds a way to grow. With the insurance money sitting safely in my account, I started planning my next move. I didn't want to just rebuild what was lost, I wanted to build something better, something lasting. I met with an agricultural engineer who specialized in sustainable farming, a young woman named Claire. She had a way of talking about soil like it was alive, and her enthusiasm was contagious. "You've got good ground here, Ben," she said, kneeling to scoop up a handful of dirt. "Fire changes the surface, but underneath, it's still rich. You give it time, care, and water, it'll come back stronger." That was all I needed to hear. Over the next few weeks, tractors rolled in and out of my property. Workers installed new irrigation systems, hauled in compost, and plowed neat rows where the ashes had settled. Every day I woke before dawn to help, not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel part of the rebuilding. The sound of engines, the smell of earth, and the sight of green starting to return. It all reminded me why I loved farming in the first place. Neighbors started stopping by again. People who once avoided eye contact were now offering help. Mr. Jenkins from down the road dropped off some spare tools. His wife brought homemade pies. Even the kids came to watch the tractors work, their laughter echoing through the open field. It was the kind of community feeling I'd hoped for when I first moved in. But there was one visit I didn't expect from the new HOA president, a tall, soft-spoken man named Mark Williams. He approached one morning while I was checking the new drip lines. "Mr. Carter," he said, extending his hand, "I just wanted to personally apologize for everything you went through. What happened to you wasn't right." I shook his hand. "Appreciate that, Mark. I'm just glad it's over." He nodded. "We've been revising some of the HOA policies. From now on, residents can use their land more freely within reason, of course. No more unnecessary harassment." That made me smile. "That's good to hear. Maybe this place can finally start acting like a community instead of a country club." He chuckled. "That's the plan." As weeks passed, my land transformed. Fresh green sprouts began poking through the soil, reaching toward the sky. The first rain after the fire fell one evening just as I was putting tools away. I stood under the porch roof, watching droplets soak into the ground, washing away the last traces of soot. Rusty barked and chased puddles, his tail wagging furiously. It felt like a cleansing for both of us. One night, sitting by the barn with a lantern, I found myself thinking about Karen, as much as I despised what she did. I couldn't deny she'd changed my life in ways I never expected. If not for her obsession, I might never have expanded my dream. Her hatred had built the foundation of my success, and that irony wasn't lost on me. Still, part of me wondered what drove her to such lengths. Control, envy, fear. Maybe she just couldn't stand seeing someone live freely in a world she tried so hard to control. Whatever the reason, I decided she wasn't worth another thought. Her chapter in my life was over. By early autumn, my new cornfield was thriving, taller, denser, and healthier than before. The golden stalks shimmered in the morning sun, swaying softly in the breeze. Every time I walked through them, I felt my father's presence, like he was proud of how I handled things. I'd rebuilt not just the farm, but myself. That season, I hosted a small harvest gathering. Neighbors came over with casseroles, bread, and laughter. Kids ran between the rows, playing hide and seek. Even Mark and his family joined in. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we all sat around a bonfire, the glow lighting up faces that, for once, weren't divided by rules or grudges. Mark raised a glass and said, "To new beginnings and to good neighbors." Everyone cheered. I just smiled, staring at the flickering fire, thinking how different it felt now compared to that night months ago. Fire had once destroyed my world. Now, it symbolized warmth, unity, and renewal. Later, as the night grew quiet and the crowd thinned, I stood alone by the field. The moonlight shimmered on the corn leaves, and the wind carried a soft whisper through them, almost like a thank you. Rusty lay beside me, head on his paws, eyes half closed. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "We did it, old boy. We made it back." In that moment, everything felt right again. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was part of something, a place that had seen me at my lowest and now watched me rise. The past was behind me, the crops were strong, and the land was alive once more. The fire had taken everything once, but it gave me something far greater in return, a fresh start, a community that finally understood, and a reminder that no matter how hard someone tries to burn you down, if your roots are deep enough, you'll always grow back. By the time the next summer rolled around, my fields stretched farther than they ever had before. The corn stood tall, golden, and proud, a sea of gold swaying gently under the morning sun. Every stalk told a story, every leaf a reminder of the fire that once turned this land into ashes. The smell of the soil, the hum of bees, and the soft rustle of crops in the wind made it clear. This was more than a farm now. It was a symbol of resilience. Word spread fast around Maple Creek Estates. What used to be a quiet corner of the neighborhood had become a small local attraction. Families stopped by to buy fresh corn and vegetables from the stand I'd built near the road. Kids waved when they passed, and even the most skeptical neighbors smiled when they saw how the land had bloomed again. The same people who once called my field an eyesore now praised it as a touch of country charm. Every Saturday morning, I opened the stand early, setting out baskets of corn, tomatoes, and sunflowers. It wasn't about profit, it was about sharing something pure with the people around me. There was something peaceful about those mornings. The laughter, the smell of fresh produce, and the hum of conversation. The community had healed, and somehow, I had to dot, but peace didn't come without closure. One afternoon I received a letter from the county courthouse. It was official. Karen Monroe had been convicted of arson and property damage. The sentence was short, just 2 years in state prison, but it was enough to clear my name once and for all. Reading her name on that court document didn't bring me joy, only a quiet sense of finality. Justice had been served. Still, I couldn't help thinking about her. I imagined her sitting in a cold, gray cell, replaying her choices. Maybe she finally realized that her hunger for control had cost her everything. Her home, her reputation, her freedom. Maybe she'd learned something from it. Or maybe not. Either way, she was gone. And the shadow she cast over Maple Creek was gone with her. As weeks turned to months. The HOA under Mark's leadership changed for the better. The new rules allowed residents to express themselves. Gardens, solar panels, even small backyard coops were now approved. For the first time, people felt free to live how they wanted without fear of being bullied by someone drunk on power. Maple Creek Estates had become a true community, not a battlefield of petty control. I even became a sort of local figure, not because of the money or the story, but because of how I handled it all. Folks said I was patient, resilient, calm, under pressure. Truth is, I wasn't always calm. There were nights I sat on that porch staring into the ashes, angry and bitter. But time has a way of softening even the hardest moments. The pain becomes part of the soil you grow from. One morning, as I walked through the cornfield, I stopped near the center, the exact spot where the fire had burned the hottest. I knelt down and pressed my hand into the earth. The soil felt warm, full of life again. It was strange to think that the very fire meant to destroy me had given this ground more strength. That's the thing about life. Destruction isn't always the end. Sometimes, it's the beginning. Later that day, I hosted a harvest gathering just like the one my father used to throw back home. Neighbors came with food, laughter filled the air, and children ran through the fields playing tag. The golden sunset poured over the land, bathing everything in light. Standing there, surrounded by friends and community, I realized something beautiful. The very place that had once felt hostile had become home. Mark approached me with a smile, handing me a cold drink. "You've really turned this place around, Ben," he said. "I guess sometimes it takes a storm to show what's worth keeping." I nodded. "Yeah, and sometimes it takes fire to teach you what can't be burned." As night fell, we lit a bonfire in the center of the field. The flames danced against the dark sky, bright, but no longer destructive. They glowed like hope itself. Rusty lay beside me, tail thumping lazily, as laughter echoed across the property. I looked around and realized that the story had come full circle. The land was healed. The people were united. And I had found peace again. Before heading inside, I took one last look at the fire. "You tried to take everything from me," I whispered softly, "but you just helped me grow." And with that, I walked back toward my home, my land shining behind me like a golden promise. The fields whispered gently in the night breeze, reminding me that no matter how bad things get, growth always follows destruction. I had lost everything once, but in the end, I gained far more freedom, peace, and a new beginning rooted in the ashes of the past. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful tales of justice, resilience, and revenge against HOA tyranny, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to HOA Bright Reality, where every story shines light on the truth.